Hello, hello. Happy Friday. Happy November. All of that good stuff. I know for some of you, this is a little bit of a surprise because I typically go live on Tuesday night. But because of the location of my guest, it made more sense for me to go live this time of day because they are in a time zone 9 hours different from real. So if you are joining me live, welcome. Say hello in the chat. If you are watching the replay, you can also say hello and we'll get on with it. You might recognize my guest today. I talked to her previously about her move with a husband, 3 kids, to a country she used to live in as well, Honduras. And our conversation was really about how it wasn't until they left the US that they were able to really have what we all have been taught was the American dream. It's been a minute. We are getting an update. They've lived in a total of 3 countries now. And so that's what we're talking about today. If you're new here, welcome to the Picky Girl Nation. I am Adelia Aborishade. Picky Girl travels the world. And when I am not traveling the world, I am here on YouTube sharing what my life is like living abroad, which I've done for the last 8 years, as well as tips, helpful hints to get your finances in good shape so that you can live the life that you want. And if those are topics of interest to you, please subscribe to the channel. That way, YouTube can continue to bring my content to your feed. So, welcome back, Jocelyn.
Hey, I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me, Adelia.
Anytime, anytime. Folks have said to me that they often would like to hear from previous guests to kind of see like what they've been up to. And y'all's life has changed a lot since the
So
last
much,
time
like
we
so
talked.
much. Yes. We've had
Um,
so many changes, like just moves, transitions, my job, like so much.
all right. So when we last spoke, y'all had I hesitate to say like traded in your unhappy life in the US for life in Honduras, but because people are like, oh, y'all are always bad mouthing the US, blah, blah, blah. But but
But
the
it's true.
reality is
Don't
the
hesitate.
the reality is the life you and your family were living was not the ideal situation. It wasn't where you had all of this time to spend with your kids, didn't have all this a lot of time to like just have you grown up time with your husband, lots of stress, lots of work, debt, all of that. And so y'all traded that in. You moved to Honduras,
Hmm.
which, is not a destin. It's kind of an unlikely destination. I can think of on one hand the number of people I've come across who have moved from the US to Honduras, but y'all don't live there anymore.
No, we do not.
So we'll start with the obvious question of why leave Honduras? If it was so great and so awesome, why don't y'all live there anymore?
Yeah. Um, I want to start by first validating everything that you said. Anyone who is new to our story, we were leaving the States. It wasn't that we were going to a specific place. We were just like, this is not for us. We were stressed, we were overworked. I barely spent time with my children. We were struggling financially. So we made that big jump. And at the time, Honduras was the best place. And I love Honduras. Honduras is amazing. I think also going in, my expectations were very low because I had no information about the country, and I feel like on the internet they show like the worst parts of Honduras. Um, and so honestly, for a foreigner, it's like the best kept secret. But I think the people of Honduras know how amazing and beautiful their country is. So we actually ended up leaving there because there was a visa issue with the school that we just were not comfortable with. However, even to this day, my husband and I, we talk about Honduras. My kids talk about Honduras. We think about when we finally make that permanent move because we're not done yet. But when we're like, we've traveled enough, we've seen enough of the world, Honduras is still like on our top list. I have nothing but good things to say about the country. And I also agree with you that Honduras is like a place you either love or hate. When people tell me they don't like Honduras, I'm like, what? How could you not like this? The culture and the music and the people and the biodiversity. But there have been some people who I've met, and like even subs have reached out to me, was like, actually, we came to visit, and it's not for me. So the more that I travel and the more we spend time outside of the States, I'm realizing that different strokes, different folks. Like, not everything's for everybody, but I loved Honduras.
100%, 100%. So, the visa situation was not what y'all wanted it to be, and so you moved on to your second country, which was
We moved to Dominican Republic, and we decided we were going to do something completely different. Because when people think of Dominican Republic, they think of Santo Domingo, Punta Cana, like a big city. And those cities are very touristy and Americanized. But we actually traded in like our big city of San Pedro Sula to a very, very small town on the north coast of Dominican Republic called Cabrera.
how many
Um,
how small we talking?
we are talking everyone knows everybody. They do not lock the doors. I vividly remember when we first arrived there, people were like, why are you here? Do you know someone here? Is there a family member? Because people don't move to small towns in the States. Like people are usually leaving small towns unless there's some relationship. Um, and we chose that because we had went to a big international school in Honduras, and that may be for some people. They're like, I want to go to the big international school and there's tons of resources. However, you also have to realize if you're going to a school that's the number one school in the country, then there's a lot of privilege there. You're going to be working with, people who have a lot of money financially, which
And a
is,
lot of
again, not
power.
bad. A lot of power. You're going to see classism. You're going to see things that you wouldn't see just at a regular school. And that goes for a school in the States. If you went to the number one school in the United States, in the state of wherever you are, you're going to be dealing with the wealthy. There's not going to be a ton of diversity. Um, so if that's what you want, that's fine. But we realized really quickly we wanted to be around a racially diverse group. We wanted to be around socially diverse group. Um, and we knew we could get that in a small town. So our small town, there were Dominicans, there were Haitians, there were Canadians, but we were at a small school, a lot less resources. I think we had maybe 100 kids in the entire school, and we felt at peace there. We felt, and also the racial diversity was an important thing for our children. In Honduras,
Mhm.
this country, as well as the city San Pedro Sula, people come in all colors. People would actually think that I was Garifuna, which is like the black people of Honduras. All Garifunas are Honduran, but not all Hondurans are Garifuna.
Or California.
However, just like in the States, or honestly, any country, when you're dealing with the wealthiest people in the nation and you go to the wealthiest school in Georgia, they are not going to look like you and me. And so, even though I would see people outside of the school that looked like me, that looked like my daughter, she didn't interact with a lot of people that looked like her every day. And I felt like it was impacting her specifically. My sons, not so much. So going to our next place, I wanted to make sure that when we were at the school, she could see herself and not just the teachers, but also the other children that she played with and her peers.
My very first day in Honduras, I y'all, I know I say a lot about how bad my Spanish is, but I didn't have anything more than like hola and gracias. And this woman was so put out with me because she's like, what? Couldn't figure out why I didn't speak Spanish because she thought I was Garifuna. And I was like, well, that was unexpected.
Yeah,
A lot of people watching this may not know that yes, there are Black folks in Honduras.
yeah.
Um,
And there's a
okay,
ton. There's a ton.
yes. But it's a sort of a similar story through most of Central America, Latin America, where the browner you are, the further down you are socioeconomically.
Mhm.
Now, you said one of the reasons y'all chose the DR was for, some ethnic racial diversity.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can't not talk about that. A lot of the media and the content we get about the DR is about, the mistreatment of Haitians or people who were Haitian but actually born in DR, or, Dominicans are famous for being like, I'm not Black.
Yeah.
I'm Spanish, I'm this, I'm that. So, was that a concern? Was that even on your radar going into it?
So the thing is, it was a concern because I had previously been in DR. The first time I actually went out the country was, I think I was like 20 years old, and the first place I went to was DR. And I remember being in a situation that was definitely driven by colorism. So that wasn't my radar. So when I was speaking with the school, I was asking them, the staff who were already there, as well as some of the families that were already there, majority Dominican, because there were no American families there. There were two Canadian families there, about the situation. And they were very honest, like, yeah, colorism exists here. Racism exists here. This is what we're doing about it at the school. These are some things that are happening in the town. And for me, I've gotten to a point, especially like when Americans tell me, oh, I wouldn't go to the yard, it's so racist. I'm like, it's racist where you are right now. Like,
True.
you cannot
True.
escape racism, and if I was like, "I'm not gonna go there because there might be a racist there," then I can't walk outside my house. Like, I cannot walk outside my house. That being said, it was still in my mind, like, will this still be the best place for my daughter? And I think that, not to invalidate anyone's experience, I think it depends on, like, 1, where you are. If you are in Mississippi, and that's the only experience you have in the States versus somewhere in San Francisco, then you might think the States is racist if you've only been to a small town that's majority white in Mississippi. And so I think, like, the experience that I had 10 years prior, I like to say I'm a lot older than that. So whenever I was 20 years old when I was in DR, I was in Santo Domingo, which you would think, because Santo Domingo is a big city and you have different cultures there, and a lot of people immigrate there and expats there. But in my small town in Cabrera, I personally did not experience that. I didn't experience that for my daughter. The school that we were at, I think they did a really good job about, like, being transparent and open and talking to kids about racial diversity and what's not okay in conversations. Um, so I never experienced that, and my daughter never experienced that, and actually, I felt like she blossomed there. She blossomed there because she started to love herself more because she saw a lot of kids that looked like her, and they spoke Spanish, and they spoke French, and they spoke Haitian Creole, and they all played together in the playground. So that was not my experience in the town. However, I do, wanna say that, yeah, I heard all the time Dominicans say that they're not Black. I said it all the time. I hear that all the time. And I'm gonna, maybe everyone's gonna cancel me because I'm gonna say this. I got to the point where I was like, you guys aren't black, because when I say that I miss black people, it was not Doña Luisa and Carlos and Lisbeth. Like when I'm talking about black, I'm using it as like, yes, your skin color is black. We cannot ignore that Dominicans have black skin.
You're talking about black with a capital B.
Yeah, like the ethnicity, which you guys are
Yeah.
not black. Like you guys are
Not
Dominican.
in the way that you and I are black. No.
Exactly. So Dominicans are black. And when you go overseas, there are not a lot of black Americans. If you go overseas and you meet other Americans, 9 times out of 10, they're white. I've seen black Germans overseas. I've seen black people from the UK overseas. I've seen Caribbean, African, but I hardly ever see black Americans. Ian and I are usually, and our kids definitely are always the only in every country we've ever traveled, visited, or lived in. And, I just want to talk to people about old school R&B music or make a Tyler Perry reference. I can't do that with Dominicans or Africans or Haitians because I'm talking about us.
And no, that's an important distinction to make because in the work that I do, I get women who are wanting to go abroad and they're hoping that there is a Black community. But if you're talking about racially Black, that could mean folks from a lot of places. And I think because of us being from the US, it's very easy for us to assume that everyone's Black experience is, they experience their Blackness the same way that we do, which is
Mhm.
not the case. And
Exactly.
so we do need to, as we're moving through international spaces and we're saying, like, hey, I miss Black people, I want to be around some Black people, we need to realize that really what we're saying is, I miss Black American culture.
That's it
That
right there.
is because being one of my dear friends here in Mexico City is Black Caribbean, and we'll often all be together and we'll be talking, and she's like lost because she's like, I don't know what y'all are talking about because we're discussing something that's very uniquely Black American, which is a very different experience than she has had growing up in the
Exactly.
Caribbean.
Exactly. So I'm hoping that's what they meant. I can't speak for Dominicans. And I'm also saying, like, that's what I meant. Like, yeah, I miss Black people. Like, I just want to speak in English sometimes and not eat habichuelas. Like, I want to fry my chicken the way I fry it. Like, that's what I missed.
So how did the kids, because how old were your kids when y'all got to DR?
So it's crazy because it feels like forever ago. We were in DR just last year. So they were a year younger from now, which means that they were 9. How old am I? 6 and 4. I don't know why I can't think of my kids' ages. So yeah, my youngest was 4, my daughter was 6, and my son was 9.
Okay. And so how was the adjustment for them? Because like you said, San Pedro Sula, very much big city vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all are moving to what's really like a pueblo, a little
Yeah.
village, a
It's
town.
what you imagine when people say I'm going abroad. You think of that. You don't like people would ask me questions like, "Does Honduras have cars?" What are you talking about? Like, yes. What are their houses like? Like our houses. But when we were in DR, it was very much like people there weren't a lot of cars. We'd walk everywhere, or we'd get on the back of a motoconcho, like all three of us, and just hold the driver. And there was one grocery store, and if whatever was there, that's what you had to cook. Like, oh, there's only eggplants today, so that's what I'm making. Um, and that was another reason why Ian and I said we have to go now because they were so young. I was like, I can't imagine taking a 15-year-old who's lived in San Pedro Sula or Santo Domingo or a big city and being like, and now we're moving to this small town where the internet doesn't work sometimes and the electricity is not stable like that. But we couldn't do that. But as small children, they loved it. They loved it. They loved it. They loved it. And the best way I can describe it was my kids were living like Gen Z. Like, it was like we could be like, okay, bye. And I knew the neighbors would all watch my kids. They would get in their bikes and I'd be like, see you guys later. I give them
I
some
think you
money and they
mean
would just
Gen X.
Gen X. I
Because
mean, I would
that
include,
was
I would,
us. You left in the morning and you came back before the sun went down, before the street lights came on, and you didn't show up. You just ate while you were out in the
exactly.
world, playing in the streets, doing whatever.
Yeah. And there's like my kids didn't have cell phones. I just knew they were out. And I would walk outside and I'd be like, hey, Doña Luisa, have you seen my kids? And she's like, oh, I think I saw them down the street at Lisbeth's house. And then I'd see a bunch of bikes. And they would play stickball on the street or football on the street. And they would, I'd find out about their day when they came home. I didn't do that day one. I wasn't like, see you guys. But I got comfortable with the culture and knowing the community. It was so great. And I also think that my kids became so much more resilient. They were so much more self-sufficient. Like having to give my a 9-year-old money. I feel like in the States I always heard, it's your fault. You made me forget my jacket. You made me forget my homework. Or it was like there was no responsibility. And like also in the States, we don't have like unsupervised adult time where kids just play with each other. It's like, let's have a play date. We schedule the play time, we watch them. Or we're going to let them play baseball on a team and we all watch them. So it made it so they had to develop skills where if there was conflict between them and other kids, like they had to talk to each other and they had to, and like the older kids looked at the younger kids. And it was just so great that they were not on Roblox all day. It's just was wonderful and they loved it and I loved it. And I think Ian was the only one who had a hard time.
Why do you think he struggled there?
um, because we had struggled so much in the States. We were two teachers and we were in Georgia and before that Indiana. You don't make any money as a teacher in either one of those states as a family of 5. So we could not like our life. I'll give you an example. Somebody asked me a few weeks ago on a podcast, what's something I never told any of my followers? And I was like, what could I possibly say? And I remembered when we were in the States, the life we were living, the neighborhood we were living, I got robbed so many times.
Oh
So
no.
for the longest time, like if someone's watching, me and Ian's name, there's no other Minervs in the world. So if you would type in Jocelyn Minerve on Google, I'm sure something will still pop up. It would always be an article of like, woman gets robbed at gunpoint, pregnant woman is, somebody busts into her house because that's the life we were living. Like Spelman Morehouse graduates, master's degree, working 80 hours a week, and I have to live where I can afford and eat what I can afford. So we had escaped that to move to Honduras, where we lived this life where we had a 5-bedroom house with a pool, and we had a nanny and a housekeeper and a driver, and our kids went to the best school, and we saved money. And I was like, now let's go to the small town. Where we had none of that stuff. And I feel like my husband had got used to it. Like we have to clean again. And
Oh,
a small
that
town in
right
this
there, having to go back to cleaning up after yourself, that is a life I never want to know again.
exactly, because you get used to it. You get used to it. And like the infrastructure in a small town in the States still has AC and electricity every day. But the infrastructure in a very small town, because we can romanticize, like, yes, we lived on the beach. Yes, I knew all my neighbors. My kids swam in a lagoon and they climbed mango trees and ate mango right off the tree. But then there'd be like 2 days with no electricity. So then we'd have to be like, well, let's just put a big bucket outside to collect water when it rains and we'll use that. And Ian was like, I don't want to do this. I want to go back to
Okay.
our big house with a pool.
I can see that. Talking about not having electricity. Um, I we're gonna sidetrack a little bit.
Okay.
Growing up, my mother was somebody who bought groceries in bulk. So like there was always food in the freezer. And then when
Mhm.
I became a mom and ran my own house, I did the same thing. And then I moved to Honduras, where the electricity, now they did at least in Tegucigalpa, they did at least like publish in the paper, like, y'all, you're in this neighborhood, you won't have electricity or whatever. And I was like, it doesn't make sense for me to be filling up a freezer. And I that kind of like broke me of that. And I'm very like
Yeah,
very uncomfortable now when there's a bunch of stuff in my freezer because I think about like, oh, what if the power goes out? And I live in the largest city in Latin America. That's not
yeah,
really a thing here, but it like, I
yeah.
don't want to say scarred me, but
Yeah, I those scheduled power outages, like, now you're like, now that I know what it's like, it same thing. If you go into my fridge now, there's nothing in there. Because I'll wake up
yeah,
tomorrow and buy the food because you just get into that becomes your new normal. But
yeah.
again, Ian doesn't want that to be his new normal.
Okay. All right. So I think we kind of covered this. What did you like most about your time in DR? Would you like least?
Um, I love the community in DR. I had never experienced that. Um, I think so. Hondurans, at least from my experience, were always the most friendly people. I never met a stranger in Honduras. Everyone was so kind and so friendly. It wasn't I think it was like the structure of San Pedro Sula. I don't know how Tegucigalpa was, but it's very common for everyone to like live in a compound in Honduras. Like, you got a big wall around everyone's house and then around the whole neighborhood. So it felt like even though everyone was really kind when I saw them, we were just all kind of like trapped in this big wall, which wasn't my normal. My friend from Brazil, I remember talking to her about this, and she was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "The
I
big
think it's a
walls."
I think it's a Central American thing because I get made fun of still to this day when I am in Mexico and I'm like, look how just everybody's outside on their phone. I don't have to buzz in to get into the
Yeah,
restaurant or the nail shop or the I still get made fun of, but that living like that and then going someplace like going to El Salvador now that the security situation is better and like you can see that they're making that shift because
yeah.
everything's built with the wall, but now we've got like cafes and so you can see both parts of that. So no, I get it.
Yeah, so that in Dominican Republic, because I was in that small town, everyone was just outside all day. Like, you would there was so much community. I knew everyone. My kid's Spanish just shot through the roof because everyone talks to everyone. Like, it would be so rude to like walk by and not stop and talk. Like, I started having to leave work early because I knew I was going to see people and have to talk to them and like see how their day was. So I really
That
love the
sounds
sense of
like a
community.
nightmare, but
That's what Ian said. Ian was saying that
as an introvert, oh my gosh, absolutely
because
not.
but, like, they would just ignore Ian because he doesn't speak Spanish well, and they would just be like my neighbors would be outside the gate like, Josie, Josie, like just yelling my name, like, we haven't seen you. Are you okay? Because everyone talks to everyone. Um, I think the hardest thing about DR was not going back to cleaning. It was being in a small town and you don't know how to cook the food that they have there. Like, we're so used to, like, I go into the grocery store and there's the bread aisle and all the fruits and vegetables in the world and all this stuff. But literally in a small town, we just have like these comados, which are stands that sell stuff. So you can buy stuff at the stand, or there's a guy in a truck who's just like, I'm selling chickens today. Who wants a chicken? Who wants a chicken? I got a bananas. And that's all there is. You can't be like, I want Fruit Loops today. Whatever is there. And so I don't know how to cook Dominican food, but it forced me. So now if you ask me, I can make pollo guisado, tostones, habichuelas, because if I didn't cook, we would starve. But again, how did I learn how to cook? The community. Doña Luisa was like, what are you doing? Let me show you how. She was like, just get that palm buen right there. And she showed me how to make ice cream out of buen pan. She showed me how to make tostones out of buen pan, uh, all types of stuff out of buen pan. So that sense of community, they would never let me struggle if I needed anything.
So then the obvious question is, why'd y'all leave?
So I would have never left DR. I loved it. It was great. I keep saying that about every country. So maybe I'm just like an optimist and I'm just like love every place that's not America. My stepdad became very ill. And it was around the time that we had just got to DR. And my mom would call me and say, he's really ill, he's sick, he's in the hospital now, he's fine, he's okay, he's not fine. And so finally in October, I was like, you know what, I need to go home, I need to see what's happening. And by the time I got home in October, so we had only been there like 3-4 months, it couldn't have been long. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even recognize my stepdad. Now, a few months prior, he had visited us in Honduras. Like, he's in a ton of our YouTube videos. I had just seen him that summer for my son's birthday. And now he was unable to walk or like take care of himself. And I told Ian, I was like, I cannot come back. So I actually stayed in the States. And then I was just very hopeful that he would get better. Because anytime someone gets sick, you imagine them getting better. Like, you just always do. But he did not get better. So then they came down. We spent 6 months in the States, and I was my stepdad's caretaker along with some of my other family members until he passed. But that whole time, I just kept thinking he's gonna get better. Even to the day before he passed, in my head, I just kept thinking like a switch was gonna happen. It never happened. Um, so that's how we ended up back in the States, but I'm trying not to cry.
I know. Well, let me, because I'm not sure where I heard you say this. You might have said this today. You might have said this some other day about like your intention was never to go back, not
Never.
even to have your ashes returned to the United States.
That's exactly what I say. That's exactly what I
Like I
said.
said, I
Word
know
for
you
word.
said it. I just can't remember when I heard you say it. So, like, yes, you wanted to be there for your stepdad, but was there a part of you that was maintaining, like, this is temporary? Or
Yeah.
did, you know, having somebody close to you get ill, did that make you rethink? Like, okay, maybe we should be here. Maybe we need to delay our next move to the next country.
Never thought that ever. Like, even with my stepdad being ill, we went to the international fair because, like I'm telling you, we were like, he's gonna get better, and he was getting better. It's just like he was getting better and then just got worse. And even he was like, I don't want you to be here for me. Like, the States was not a good place for us. There's somebody out there where the States is good for them, but it wasn't good for us. So we always knew it was temporary. I would say all the time, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. Is it going to be till my stepdad gets better? Like, until he's not here anymore? Like, but we are not going to be here. This is not for me. So once he passed, that's when we're like looking like, where are we going to go next? And if I'm being honest, I wanted to go back to DR.
Because that's what I was going to ask. Was that even a consideration to go back?
Yeah. I wanted so badly to go to DR. However, at the time when we moved to DR, again, this small town, we work at international school. It's no secret that an international school pays very well. They pay for your plane tickets. They give you health insurance, blah, blah, blah. You save a ton of money. So we were like, oh, we have our savings good. We're in a really good place. We can afford to make less. So let's choose happiness. So we went to DR. We didn't make any money. We made enough money to live in DR. But we weren't saving like we were in Honduras. Like, it was not that type of move. We knew that we were going to take a major pay cut, but we could afford it. The 6 months that we moved back to the States, just 6 months, we ate up all of our money. There was no money because, and it's crazy. I was like, because when we moved to the States, we were like, okay, we should get jobs as teachers. This is before I became a full-time caretaker to my stepdad. And I was like, man, we're gonna make so much money because we hadn't worked in the States in so long. And so it was like a pay raise. So I was like, man, we'll probably live off your salary and save mine. But we had not been lived in the States in so long that we didn't realize how expensive the States had become in like the last 5 years or maybe 3 years. So everything was double, triple. I knew car insurance was triple. A car note was double, rent was double, groceries had like quadrupled. Everything was so much more that when we did the math, we did not get raises. We were making less. We were making less because our salary would have tripled because everything doubled and tripled, but our salary didn't. So I was like, we're making less money. So we went through all of our savings, making the move, being able to feed our family. We were sending our kids to public school. And it was, supposedly like a good public school. My kids were being notoriously bullied every day. No one was doing anything about the bullying. They were miserable at school, which they had never been. And this was my daughter's first time ever going to school in the States. So my son had went to this exact same public school when he was in kindergarten. So now 4 years into the future, we're back in the same city. And now he's going to the school for fourth grade. But things had all changed because of COVID. When my son went to kindergarten, the kids read books and they had circle time and they would have stations. But now my daughter was in the same school at kindergarten. Everybody was on an iPad. Everyone was on an iPad. All the classes were on Google Chromebooks in the Google Classroom. And it was the days were so long. Like they were miserable at school. I was miserable teaching at the school. And it was awful. And so the reason why we couldn't go back to DR was we spent all our money. We can't go with $0, negative dollars. So now we owe all the debt from, me not working, taking care of my stepdad, me running up credit card bills just to buy necessities. So we couldn't go back to somewhere where it was like, I don't need money. Yeah, I do. I need it. I have nothing. So it was just not an option. I think maybe one day it could be an option, but it just was not an option.
Okay. So y'all went to the job fair,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened?
So we went to the job fair and we had every intention of just going back to Latin America. We were like, let's just go back to Latin America. But we had always said we would one day go to Africa. And so in our brains, we were like, oh, we'll go to Africa when the kids are older. Like in our heads, we were like, we'll go to Latin America first. My kids already speak Spanish. It's close to home. And when they get older, we'll go to Africa. But we had made 2 moves already to 2 different countries. And so I was like, we got to stay put somewhere that we know we can stay put. I still so badly wanted to go to Ecuador. And then I talked to you. That's really what happened. That's really what happened. It's a true story. I wanted to go to Ecuador. Ian wanted to go to Ethiopia. So I just wasn't ready to move so far away. And I was like, I don't want another transition. But I realized that I needed to be financially free. And I wasn't going to get that with the package that they offered us in Ecuador. And the package financially at my school was a very, very, I feel like, lucrative package. Like it was enough for me to save, pay my bills, send money home to my mom, and also do things with my children, like travel. And then also the school itself, like when I started looking more into the school, the community, it's just amazing. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best schools on the continent, definitely the best school in the country. It's so diverse. And I mean that like racially, ethnically, linguistically, there's like 30 languages spoken at the school. My daughter fits in, my sons fit in. Like it's just like out of as far as schools go, 11 out of 10. It's definitely the best school that I've ever worked at in my entire career.
Wow. Um, I want to take a moment and point out something in case somebody is watching this. You know, you and your husband have worked abroad. Y'all were certified teachers in the state. That states that's a fairly easy way to get abroad. That is what I did. It helped me transition because I could do what I was already doing. But one of the things, whether people are teaching or they're doing other things and they're getting employment in other countries, I often hear people kind of scoff at salaries. And their first thought is, oh my gosh, this is half of what I make. And I want to make the point here. You'll notice that Jocelyn has talked about the ability to save. And that's what's really important, particularly if you are going abroad and being employed, like um, that they're putting together a package, like the five bedroom house y'all had with the pool in Honduras. You were not paying that rent.
No.
The school was.
Hmm.
Okay, you know where y'all. So your employer is picking up those costs. So in theory, you want to be making enough since you have fewer bills that you can stash a lot of that cash.
Yeah.
And so my whole message to folks who might have been looking at jobs in other countries and they're like, yeah, but that salary ain't doing what I needed to do. The question you should be asking people who are there is what is your ability to save? What
Hmm.
percentage of your salary are you able to save? Because that's a far more important question, I
Yeah.
think, than, well, what is the salary or what is the average salary, something like that.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that, I actually had made like a comparison video years ago about like what it would cost to live like my life in Honduras in Atlanta because we had left Atlanta to Honduras. In Honduras, again, I had like a 4 or 5 bedroom house, 4 bathrooms. We had a guest house on our property where our full-time nanny stayed. We had a pool. Our kids' tuition was paid for, all three of them at the best school. We had worldwide health insurance. We had round trip plane tickets every year. And on top of that, we got a salary. At the time, I believe our salary was $25,000. Now, so when somebody offers you a salary of $25,000, you're like, that's not enough money. But if what am I paying for outside of food? Like the school is paying for everything, one, and then two, it's tax free. I at least every country's different, but in Honduras, the $25,000 was all my money, and then I did not have to. Well, you have to report taxes, but I think it's like you don't have to report the income. I forgot.
Honduras doesn't tax it because they don't tax teachers. And then the US, as long as you're making less than whatever the cap is for the foreign
It's like about
earned income
100K for a
exclude,
couple.
it's like 128,000. Like you're not
Hmm.
gonna have that problem in Latin America.
Exactly.
You're not gonna make more than that.
Now, when we left Atlanta at the time, because this was around COVID, or when Ian was the last time Ian was working as a teacher in the States, I believe his salary was $42,000. That is taxed. They take out all the money for insurance for a family. So I really think my salary in this or his salary in the States was the same in Honduras after you take all the taxes, except in the States we had to pay for rent and electric and bills and all of our kids' tuition if they went to private school.
Yeah. So that again, it's not just about the number.
Hmm.
It is about how much can you save?
Hmm.
What is the saving possibility there? Okay. So y'all have ended up in Ethiopia.
Hmm.
And I feel like that is not where you thought y'all would end up. And I know it caused you a lot of like, should we, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
What ultimately was the deciding factor to take the offer in
This is,
Ethiopia?
this is gonna sound so hilarious because I really do love Ethiopia now. Like maybe I just lucked out in
Now,
every place I just love, but it's been so incredible. Um, I felt because if you go back to our first interview, I when we went to Honduras, it was because I was like, Ian, you coming with me or you not? Like that's the ultimatum. And I know a lot of women who are married or have partners are like, well, I can't go because my partner has a job or he doesn't really want to go, blah, blah, blah. And I spoke about like as women, we always do this thing where we're selfless. We change our lives for our husband, we change our lives for our children, we change our lives for our parents as they age. That's all we do is say no to things and for other people to say yes. And so I got to a point in my life where I had been wanting to go abroad a long time. And I told Ian, me and the kids are going. I hope you join us. And he came. So we went to Honduras because I wanted to go. We went to DR because I wanted to go. My stepdad got sick and I was like, I want to go back home. Ian said yes to everything. So then he fell in love with Ethiopia. So like the real factor is like, I was like, I cannot say no to this man. I got a good husband who didn't follow me all around the globe. And he has, whatever reason, fallen in love with this school, this community, this country. I gotta say, put in my big girl pants and be like, let's go. And so we went. And honestly, it was definitely the best decision. Looking back, like this was the best decision for us, for the kids, our career. There's been so many incredible things that have happened that would have only happened if we would have came here. So that was the driving factor.
okay. Did you have any like big reservations about going to Ethiopia?
Yeah, I did. I had a lot of reservations because all I've heard is that Ethiopia is a very poor country. There's crime, there's a civil war. Like, however, I had to remember all the things I heard about Honduras. It's the murder capital of the world. There's crime, femicide. They're just macheting all the women. Like, I had heard all these horrible things about Honduras, and that was not my experience. And so you had told me this, and I had always remembered you said, don't have any expectations, and your only expectations is there will be people there. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to have any expectations. I'm not going to have any worries. I'm going to talk to the people at the school that I'm going to, not Google or someone who's never been to Addis Ababa. And so I think because this was a third move to a third country, I think it was easier for me versus if our first stop would have been Ethiopia.
Okay. So, did any of those concerns that they in the time that y'all been there, have they borne out? Has, you know, have they
No,
been an issue?
they're not 0% an issue. It's a lot to do because we are very privileged. We're Americans. We have an American passport. Like our experience is going to be different. When someone is leaving your country, doesn't even matter what country. For us, we left the States. I have a master's degree. I have a bachelor's degree. I'm a fluent Spanish speaker. I have a job. I work at a great school. I'm not going to be like, now let me move to the worst part of Ethiopia I can possibly find and live in a state of poverty and danger. People who live like that cannot escape it. They want to. And it's the same in the States. There's someone in the States who lives right now, they're in danger, they don't have a place to live, they don't have food, they don't want to live like that. But if you are someone who is educated, who again has a job lined up, has resources, you have a privilege that you don't have to live like that. I didn't have to go to a small town in Dominican Republic and collect rainwater. That was a choice that I chose. But I knew a lot of people live there, live like that their whole life because there was no other choice. And so I say that in Addis Ababa, I live in a really nice neighborhood, in a really nice apartment. I've walked here day or night. I've walked at night with my children. I've traveled outside of Addis Ababa most recently. But again, you can't travel to every part of Ethiopia, just like you can't travel to every part of LA at nighttime alone. Like you cannot do that. So you have to be smart and intelligent. I also think it's different because I am Black. Um, People always think Ian's Ethiopian, and been here long enough, he does look very Habesha. Like he looks, I could see why. Like now that we're here, but people just come up to him speaking Amharic all the time, and he's like, I don't speak Amharic. Just like in Honduras, people would speak to him in Spanish because they thought he was Garifuna. I think I'd have a completely different experience if I was white and blonde hair and blue eyes and 5 feet tall. That would be a
Okay.
completely different experience. So my experience is different.
Okay. Um, H and D, I'm gonna guess this is D, wants to know, what does your work-life balance look like in Ethiopia? Because we know that teachers work really long hours and have
Mhm.
incredible workloads in the US, and it is a very difficult place to achieve any sort of work-life balance.
Yeah. Well, I want to say hey H and D, and I also think it's D. So hi. um, my work life balance in comparison to the states is a lot more balanced. So in the states, I feel there was never a time in the states where I said I'm all caught up. Like it was just impossible. I would never say that. I was never all caught up or even close to it. Um, and I feel like I would work like 80 hours a week. And I remember working lunch, just like eating and working at the same time. None of that exists here. I don't do any of that at all. However, being in Ethiopia compared to Latin America, I do work more. I work more at this school, but it's because I think the culture. There's no siesta here. So when we are in Dominican Republic, I would have like an hour and 45 minutes every single day, which was the kids' lunch. I don't have an hour and 45 minutes every single day, which is the kids' lunch here. But things move very slow here. So I'm not, when I'm at lunch, I'm at lunch. I'm not watching kids and working and meeting and eating as fast as I can and eating in the car. I'm at lunch. And when I'm at home, I'm at home. So like, Ian and I are content creators on YouTube. I couldn't have a YouTube channel back home. There's no time to do anything in the States. So I think the work-life balance is really good. It's a lot slow. It's a lot slower.
Okay. Um, Dr. J. Marshall wants to know about the food.
The food. So the food in Ethiopia, the funny thing is I never tried Ethiopian food until I got to Ethiopia. So when we were given the job offers, we were in New York and we were this close to trying Ethiopian food because I knew they'd have it in New York. But we were like, let's just wait till we get there. When I first got here, I was like, I don't like injera. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, I don't like injera. But I also, when I first got to Honduras, I was like, I don't like baleadas. But then it just grows on you. So now, like every day, I look forward to getting like my injera and my tibs and my gomen, and I pick up the food. And so I think the food is really good. My son, my oldest son's the same way. He thinks the food is really good. He loves it. My two youngest, they don't eat anything. But they don't eat anything in the States. Like I would make a big dinner and they're like, can I have a roll? They just all they want to do is eat chicken nuggets and cheese pizza everywhere we go, even home. So I think the food is delicious here. And I will say that the Ethiopian food is delicious here. Ethiopia does not have there's no imports. I say that term loosely, but there isn't. In Honduras, there was Dunkin' Donuts and Pizza
Oh, yeah.
Hut and Wendy's and Taco. Well, no, it's Taco Bell, but Popeyes. But in Ethiopia, you got whatever's out there, and it's
And that's what
Ethiopian food.
I was gonna ask, how hard is it to come by chicken nuggets and cheese pizza?
You can buy if you want to spend $1 bajillion. So the other day I saw salmon in the store, and it was the equivalent of $80. So I don't eat salmon here, and I'm not. I refuse. I refuse. And like, how good quality could that be? Like $80.
There's what Mexico has broken me of, because at least here in the city, we've got incredible grocery stores, but that is not where the majority of people shop. It's
Mhm.
people who got a little money, want to look like they got a little money, or people who have lived somewhere else and are used to what we consider to be grocery stores. But like buying frozen food, I have to think long and hard about that because the idea that like don't let the frozen food thaw out and refreeze it and
Yeah.
like I don't know that that's clearly been communicated here. So I like I won't buy ice cream from the store because like I
The
don't know how
quality
long
control.
it's had it,
It's quality
how
control.
many times it's been frozen and unfrozen. Mm,
It's
no,
very
no
similar
thanks.
here.
Yeah. Okay. We also had a question about the visa process. Now, y'all are there with work visas. I'm assuming that your employer took care of the vast majority of that.
Yes, so I don't like speaking on things I know nothing about. And I do that. We're secured work visas. We have what's like a little red card. It's similar to what like a diplomat would get. So now we are like temporary residents. I can leave in and out of the country, just show my temporary card. But the school literally processed everything for us.
So, I've never heard of anybody moving there on their own in the way that like I moved to Mexico on my own. So I don't have any idea of how difficult the visa process is. I assume it's not going to be super easy, but
I know
I
one
don't have any.
person.
Go ahead.
So I actually met a vlogger here. Her name is if you're on YouTube, her name is Princess Ethio Living. No, Princess Living Free. Princess Living Free. That's her email address. And she is American born, moved to Ethiopia. Her first experience was doing like a Peace Corps, but she met her husband here. So I think it's a different story because her husband is Ethiopian. However, she does
Okay.
talk about that. And from what I've heard, it is a very difficult process. In most countries, especially if you're not a native, there it's just like, are you able to buy property? Are you able to get a job? Like, there's a lot of things that you're not able to do. Like, how long are you able to stay there? And Ethiopia is one of those countries. So I think it's really difficult. Um, Princess Living Free, that's her name. It's really difficult, I think, if you were to just come on your own.
Yeah. Um, any insight into how the senior community is treated, older folks,
Hmm.
in comparison to the US, in comparison to, Honduras and DR?
Um, I mean, it's probably gonna sound bad, but I think no matter where you are, like people don't take care of the elderly. Like in the States, like I see 80-year-olds still working. Like why nobody should work their whole life, pay into like a pension plan, social security, and have to work a really physical job. I just don't think anyone should do that. And I also think culturally we don't like in the States, we don't take care of usually. I mean, I think we do like black people, but Americans in general you don't take care of your parents. You put them in a home or something, or someone else takes care of them. So what I've seen two different things. I have seen in Honduras and in Ethiopia where there's a big strong community. Like they're going to take care of your parents and your grandparents and they move in with you. Ethiopians have told me they don't call the police, they call their neighbors. Like that's the first people you call. Like, and that's what it was like in the Dominican Republic and Honduras también. But I have also seen elderly people on the street. I have not seen that outside of living in San Francisco, where there's a huge homeless population when I lived in California or in LA. But I see older people on the street. And so I wonder like who's taking care of them or who's not taking care of them. So I have seen both sides of those from my eyes.
And how uh, we might have kind of touched on this a little bit, but how are y'all received there? And I'll put a little addendum on that. Um,
Mhm.
there are many Black Americans who have the idea that when we visit the continent, um, there will be some sort of immediate connection or kinship with the folks that live there. Um,
Mhm.
and the people I have interviewed on this channel and on my podcast, that has not necessarily been their experience, but primarily I've talked to people who lived in West Africa. And so I
Mhm.
am curious, since y'all are in East Africa, how have you been received, either as because y'all are Black Americans, because you're a family of five? I don't know if that plays into it at all, having young
Yeah.
children.
I think all those things play into it, and that's why it's always so hard. And I have to start with like, I'm speaking from my experience. In Latin America, we were always seen as foreigners, even with Garifunas. They were always kind, but like I asked the Garifunas directly, like, when you see me, like you see us coming, do you think like, oh, sis? And they're like, oh no, not
No,
at all.
you ain't my
You're
sis.
American, like no. Even though she braided my hair in micros and we look alike. No, we are foreigners. But here in Ethiopia, I don't feel that way at all. We've been very much embraced. There's a term in Ethiopia that I'm about to butcher so badly. It's Ferengi, which means foreigner. And so at the school, as usual, because Black Americans usually don't travel, Ian and I are the only Black American family that I know there. I know someone who's Ghanaian. I know someone who's um, um, Tanzanian. But we're the only like mom, dad, kids, and we're Black and American. And so, we're walking around with our friends who are like from New Zealand or Australia or from wherever they are, Haiti. And all the white people, they're like, foreign G, foreign G, foreign G. I'm always called sister. Everywhere I go, sister, sister, sister. And I hear them say that about other foreigners as well, but I've never been called foreign G. So I asked someone at the school who's Ethiopian. She's from Addis. She's lived her whole life. And she's like, they would never call you that. And so I've been embraced. Like people have told me to my face, like, welcome home. We're glad to have you back.
Oh, wow.
Nobody has ever said that to me in Honduras. And I don't think they ever will, or DR. So I feel very much embraced. That's been my experience. Recently, it's coming out on Sunday. I can't speak too much about it, but we had this crazy experience where we're invited to a reality show in Ethiopia where they want to know, like they basically like explore foreigners' lives, and we were able to do that. And people were just so excited that we were here and like, yay, you're here, you're embracing Ethiopia. That's so great that you've came back. So it's been a really good feeling. I'm not to say I don't know if that's everyone's experience, but that's been my experience, and it's been wonderful.
Okay. We had another question. Um, I think I know the answer to this one. Is Ethiopia your forever home, or are you keeping your options open?
It is our for a while home, I think. I think with the realization of, my stepdad passing, because I was like, oh, I was gonna go anywhere. But yeah, it is really important. I miss my family. We are on a 15-hour direct flight to Atlanta. A lot of my family lives in California. I'm 10 hours ahead of my mom, 7 hours ahead of my dad. So I want to be here for a while. To me, in my head, we'll be here at least 4 or 5 years. In my head, that's what I think. But I said that about
Okay.
Honduras, so I don't know. Um, would I like to stay here forever? I would, but I think not to blame my mom, but now my mom is alone. She has no husband. She had her only daughter is here. Her grandkids are here, and my mom has a health condition where she cannot travel for long periods of time. So I know she can never come visit us in Ethiopia. And my stepdad was about 23 years older than my mom. So my mom is still really young. So, but as she gets older, I would like her to be with us. I just can't imagine just my mom alone in the States and us living in Ethiopia. and her with no way to get here. So I think that's really what's holding us back. And when we think about like a long-term permanent home, we
Mhm.
want to be somewhere that we can get to her or she can come be with us, which looks like maybe West Africa or back in Latin America. But I don't think Ethiopia will be our forever home.
Okay. All right. Um, you mentioned traveling outside of the capital. Can you talk about the ease and cost of travel?
Mhm. So the great thing about Addis Ababa is that there's like direct flights to everywhere. Like you can, so this in December next month, we're going to Tanzania and we're gonna go to Zanzibar and Dar es Salaam. But there's flights to like pretty much everywhere in Africa because there's so many embassies here. And then you have the African Union here. So there's like direct flight to Atlanta, Chicago. There's direct flights everywhere. So it's really easy. And also outside of Africa, there's a direct flight to Turkey and France and so many other places, Greece, but they're expensive. And it's, you know, it makes no sense to me that flying from one part of Africa to another part of Africa is cheaper than if, or more expensive than if I flew to Turkey. Like I'm flying to Europe now. So, I mean, there's a lot
So
of,
that is bearing out because that had been my experience
mhm,
when I looked, and that's what I hear a lot is about if you're because logic would tell you, well, once I get to the continent, getting between places should be fairly easy, fairly
yeah,
affordable. Like that's what happens in Asia, that's what happens in Africa, that's what happens
yeah,
in the Americas. I mean, Asia, Europe is what I
yeah.
meant to say. But is that's you're not finding that.
No, it's easier that it's closer. Like it's closer for me to fly to Kenya and Tanzania and other places. But I was looking at flights the other day, like, oh, maybe we'll go to Senegal. It was cheaper to fly to Atlanta than it was to Senegal. And I was like, we're not going to Senegal.
Oh
I
boy.
was like, I'm not paying for
Wow.
5 tickets to go somewhere that's cheaper or that's more expensive, like a lot more. Not a little bit, like a lot more. I'm like,
Mhm.
Atlanta is cheaper than Senegal. Like I do understand it's on the opposite side of the continent, but that doesn't make
But
any sense.
still, but still. Um, you just talked about having to buy 5 plane tickets. In case there's somebody watching this who is also looking at teaching internationally, um, let's talk about that just a little bit. Y'all are a teaching couple where both
Mhm,
of you are certified educators. Do
mhm.
you think that has helped in landing positions as opposed to if it was just one of you?
Oh, yes. It has not been helpful, it has been necessary. So, somebody actually reached out to me a while ago through my channel asking, like, how do we make the move? And she was saying, like, her husband was a teacher. They had 3 kids, and she was a stay-at-home mom. And she was worried about the experience. And I told her, I was like, I'm not worried about the experience at all. There will be someone who will hire your husband. I'm worried about the dependents.
Yeah,
I'm worried
because
about
from
how many dependents you have. And so it has not been helpful, it's been necessary because I get it thinking about it from a, logistical, financial employer standpoint. You have someone who is single, no kids, and they teach middle school Spanish. And you're going to pay for their housing, which is an apartment. You're going to pay for one round trip ticket. You're going to pay for one insurance for the year and one of everything. But if you are a person who's also applying for that Spanish teacher position and you have 4 dependents, so now the school has to pay for 5 plane tickets and 5 insurances and a house and give you free tuition for your kids, that's a really big expense. So it's been very helpful because in the international world, um, it's normal to be like there's one teacher and one dependent, to like
yeah,
a mom and a single and a child, or a husband and their wife. That's not a problem. So it kind of works out because it's like there's Ian and our son. There's me and my daughter. where we get like, ooh, it's the middle child or our last child. And it's been brought, in the States, you wouldn't really ask questions like, how many children do you have? Do you plan on having more kids? They can ask whatever they want in other countries. Like they can ask, they've asked like, do your kids have any medical issues? They can ask anything they want in most of these
Because they're
countries.
trying to figure out how much it's going to cost them to have you
Exactly.
on.
So it's been very necessary, I think, because of where we've been to have for us to both be teachers. I don't think we'd have
Okay.
as much luck or offers or anything if we hadn't have both been teachers or worked in education. So that's another thing I just want to say really fast. If you're watching and you're like, man, I really want to use education as a way to go abroad, you don't have to be a teacher. Schools have nurses and marketing managers and admissions officers and athletic directors and coaches, counselors, I can't think of the word right now, occupational therapists. So schools, international schools have all those people. And so there is a job right now, even if you're like, I work in marketing at an international school, that will give you all the benefits of someone who was teaching in the classroom.
Okay. There was some talk a few years ago about like, you really got it made if you are a teaching couple with no dependents.
Oh my gosh, you've got
Because,
it made. You've got it
because
made.
they are saving on housing, and they're getting the price. They're getting two for the price of one, basically.
Yeah, they're putting you in one apartment together in a one bedroom. They're like, woohoo. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you're a teaching couple, that you guys are like the golden ticket.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know it is late there. Thank you for coming to join us. Y'all make sure that you follow the adventures of the Minervas on the Move. Their YouTube channel is linked in the description. I'm trying to think. I think we asked all of the questions that there was one other question in the chat about credit. Um, I have only come across one country where your credit in the US matters. Does your credit in the US matter there in Ethiopia?
No one's ever asked about that. And my
Okay.
credit got messed up. So I'm glad they didn't ask about that.
Um, are are y'all interested in establishing credit there? Like, is it to your benefit at all?
No, there's really not. It's not really a benefit. Even if we were to stay here long term, there's really not a benefit.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us again. Y'all go follow their channel so that you don't miss this weekend's video about their experience on a reality show.
Oh yeah, well, actually Sunday we're putting out a video day in the life. So if you're interested in what it's like teaching at an international school in Ethiopia, posting it on Sunday, and the reality show is live or it's on like network TV, completely in
Oh,
Amharic. So unless you speak Amharic, you might be a little
oh,
lost.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All
So yeah,
right,
that was
y'all
one of
take,
those things I was saying where it's like I wouldn't have hadn't experienced a lot of these things if I hadn't came here. I wouldn't have been on this network program.
that's awesome. I, not that I can see the future, but I do be knowing. I really think that y'all are going to have some incredible opportunities because you are there. The universe tends to unfold as it should, and it sure seems like that is where the universe wanted y'all to be.
Yeah, it did for sure.
Okay. All right. So, y'all enjoy the rest of this first day of November. Enjoy your weekend. It is Day of the Dead here. And so I'm just going to chill at my house and avoid the crowds.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank you
y'all.
so much for having me on your channel again. This was so great. I hope we just do this like every 2 years. Just make it a reunion.